When I think back on that day, the one where my life split into a before and an after, I can still hear their laughter echoing against the narrow Italian streets. My husband Gabriel and his old college friends thought it was funny, just a cruel joke after too much wine. They drove away their rental car, disappearing around the bend, the taillights shrinking until there was nothing left but the smell of exhaust and the pounding silence that followed. I remember standing there, my mouth still open mid-sentence, my words swallowed by the sound of the car doors slamming shut. At first I didn't believe it. I told myself he would circle back. This was just Gabriel making a point, punishing me for speaking up about his drinking, for embarrassing him in front of his friends. I clutched my purse tighter, whispering, "He's coming back. He has to come back." But as minutes turned into an hour and the sun dipped below the rooftops of a town whose name I couldn't even pronounce, the truth settled in my stomach like a stone. I was alone. Alone in a foreign town where no one knew me. Alone without my credit cards because Gabriel had offered to carry them for me earlier when my purse was too full. Alone with €80 in cash and a phone that buzzed with rejection after rejection, calls straight to voicemail, messages sent but never answered. My husband hadn't just left me, he had cut me off. He had blocked me. His friends had too. It wasn't an impulsive mistake. It was planned, deliberate humiliation. I found the cheapest room I could, a dingy space above a bakery, the kind of place where the bed sagged in the middle and the walls smelled faintly of yeast. The woman who handed me the key spoke no English, but when she saw the tears streaming down my face, she patted my arm gently. That night I lay awake staring at the cracked ceiling, refreshing my phone, waiting for Gabriel's apology. Surely he would realize how far he'd gone, come back full of excuses, ready to shift the blame onto me like he always did. But he didn't. By the second day, I was rationing food, buying only a single sandwich to stretch the little money I had left. I wandered the town, checking hotels and cafes for any sign of our group, only to realize they had moved on without me continuing their reunion trip through Florence and beyond. By the third day, I felt like a ghost haunting cobblestone alleys, invisible, discarded. A cafe owner noticed me lingering outside his door and pressed a free espresso into my hands. He gave me directions to the police station, where an officer listened to my story with sympathetic eyes, but could offer nothing beyond a nod and a filed report. His English was broken, my Italian non-existent. I left feeling smaller, more invisible than before. That afternoon, desperation drove me into a pawn shop. I slipped off my wedding ring, the 2-carat diamond Gabriel had proudly given me on our 5th anniversary, meant to symbolize our forever. The shopkeeper offered me far less than it was worth, but enough for bus tickets, maybe a ferry, maybe a chance to get far enough away that Gabriel and his friends couldn't laugh at me anymore. I stood at the bus station, staring at the departure board, my father's name glowing on my phone screen. One call and he would wire money for a ticket home. One call and I would return to Boston, to the carefully curated life I had built around Gabriel's career. A life where I had slowly shrunk myself to fit his expectations, shelving my own design career, my friendships, even my voice. But staring at that cracked screen, I hesitated. For the first time, I saw the fence Gabriel had built around me, for what it was, not protection but a prison. When the ticket agent asked me where I wanted to go, I surprised even myself. "Greece," I whispered. "As far as you can send me." Hours later, I stumbled off a bus in a whitewashed coastal village, my body stiff, my stomach hollow. The salt air carried the scent of olives and sea, and for the first time in days I felt something flicker inside me. It wasn't safety, it wasn't comfort, it was freedom. Gabriel had meant to teach me a lesson about dependence. Instead, he had accidentally set me free. But freedom isn't soft. It doesn't come wrapped in ribbons. It comes with blistered feet and empty pockets. I wandered until my legs gave out, collapsing under olive trees that shimmered like silver coins in the sun. I thought that was where I would end, another discarded woman, abandoned and forgotten. But instead, I opened my eyes to kindness. An elderly woman knelt over me, pressing a canteen of water to my lips, her words in Greek, soft but urgent. "Elena," she said, tapping her chest. She and her husband Nikos led me to their farmhouse, fed me soup, gave me a bed, clothed me in their daughter's old dress. They didn't ask why I was there. They simply offered what they had. For days I resisted staying, trying to leave, clutching my purse, as though pride could carry me forward. But each time Elena stopped me, her eyes wet with tears, as she showed me photos of her daughter, who had moved to Australia. Her grandchild she would never hold. She didn't want to trap me. She wanted me to fill an empty chair to share bread at her table. And slowly I did. I gathered eggs. I learned to rake olives into nets, my hands blistering, until Elena pressed salve into my palms with a smile. I learned to cook without recipes, to weave baskets, to knit scarves. I learned that imperfection could be beautiful. I learned that life could be simple and still full. One day, Elena pressed a small envelope of euros into my hand after we sold olive oil at the market. "Fair work, fair pay," she said. I stared at the money, barely enough for a meal in my old Boston life, but more valuable than any designer bag Gabriel had ever bought me. It was mine. Earned. Free. For months I lived in that rhythm, my body growing stronger, my skin tanned, my heart steadied. And for months I refused to speak Gabriel's name. He belonged to the past, he had no power here. Until the email came. It was late, the farmhouse quiet, when I powered on my old phone for the first time in weeks. Buried in the flood of unread messages was one from him. "I know where you are. I'm coming to bring you home. My flight lands in Athens Thursday." My blood turned to ice. He had found me, but he would not find the same woman he had left behind in Italy. The days leading up to Thursday stretched like taut wire, each hour humming with dread. I tried to lose myself in routine, feeding the hens, hanging laundry, kneading bread with Elena, but my thoughts kept circling back to that email. Gabriel was coming. The man who had left me stranded in Italy, laughing as the car drove away, was boarding a plane to Athens with the arrogance of someone who believed I still belonged to him. I sat by the window at night, staring out at the olive groves silvering under the moonlight. My heart churned with conflicting emotions, fear, anger, and something deeper I could barely name. Once I would have rushed to him at the airport, begging for an explanation, hoping for scraps of affection. Now the thought of seeing his face filled me with both nausea and resolve. Elena noticed, of course. She always did. One evening, as she pressed a steaming mug of chamomile tea into my hands, she said softly, "You are not the same woman who arrived here. Don't let him make you forget that." Her words settled in my chest like stones, anchoring me to the earth. She was right. I was not the same. I had scars on my hands from raking olives, muscles in my arms, from carrying baskets, a strength that Gabriel had never imagined I could hold. I was no longer the wife who apologized for taking up space. On Wednesday, I went into town and withdrew the small envelope of euros I had been saving. With shaking hands, I bought a simple black dress and sturdy shoes, not to impress him, but to remind myself that I could choose my own armor. I also bought a cheap second-hand phone with a Greek SIM card. For the first time in months, I felt control return to my fingertips. Thursday came too quickly. Nikos drove me to Athens, his weathered hands steady on the wheel, his silence a comfort. He didn't ask questions. He simply pressed a hand to mine before I stepped out near the airport cafe, as if to remind me that family could exist in forms other than blood and vows. I saw Gabriel before he saw me. He was taller than I remembered, his tan from Italy faded, his hair slicked back with the precision of someone who cared more about appearance than substance. He scanned the crowd, his mouth set in a line of irritation. He wasn't worried. He wasn't sorry. He was annoyed that I hadn't made this easy for him. When his eyes landed on me, his expression shifted into practiced charm. He spread his arms, forcing a smile. "There you are." I didn't move. He walked toward me, his luggage wheels clicking sharply against the floor. "You've had your little adventure," he said. His voice pitched low, controlled. "Now let's go home." The word home twisted in my stomach. That house in Boston had never been a home. It had been a stage where I played the part of his perfect wife, applauding his stories, laughing at his friends' jokes, shrinking myself so he could shine. I lifted my chin. "I am home." His eyes narrowed. The charm slipped. "Don't be dramatic, Anna. You embarrassed me running off like this. Do you have any idea what people are saying? My friends think you've lost your mind?" A bitter laugh escaped my throat before I could stop it. "Lost my mind. You left me in the middle of a foreign town without money or a way back. You cut me off like I was disposable. And now you expect me to crawl back because you decided it's convenient. For a moment he faltered. His jaw tightened, his hand flexing at his side. But then he leaned closer, his voice dripping with venom. "You don't have options, Anna. You need me. Without me, you're nothing." The old me would have believed him. The woman who had pawned her wedding ring for a bus ticket might have believed him. But not anymore. I stepped back, creating space between us. "I have more than you ever gave me. I have people who see me. I have work that matters. I have myself." Anger flared in his eyes, bright and dangerous. He reached for my arm, but I pulled away. "Don't touch me," I said firmly, loud enough that heads turned in the cafe. His face burned with humiliation, the same humiliation he once delighted in inflicting on me. For a long, tense moment, we stood locked in a silent battle. Then he straightened, his voice dropping to a hiss. "You'll regret this. You'll come crawling back." But as I walked away, my heart pounding, I realized something profound. I didn't need to win the argument. I had already won by refusing to play the game. I left him standing in that airport cafe, his luggage still at his side, his arrogance cracking under the weight of his own failure. And as the doors slid open and the warm Athens air wrapped around me, I felt lighter than I had in years. Back at the farmhouse, Elena hugged me so tightly I thought I might break. "It is done," she asked. I nodded, tears stinging my eyes. "It's done." But the story wasn't over. Gabriel didn't vanish. He sent emails, voicemails, even letters to Elena's address. Each one more desperate, more venomous than the last. He threatened to ruin me financially, to drag my name through mud, to twist the story until I was the villain. But each threat only revealed his fear. He knew the truth. I had stepped outside his control and he couldn't pull me back. So I kept working. I helped Nikos harvest olives. I sold jars of oil at the market. I even began sketching again, my old passion for design stirring back to life. And slowly the fear that had once wrapped around me began to loosen. One evening, sitting under the olive trees, I looked up at the stars and whispered a promise to myself: I will never go back. The weeks that followed blurred together a rhythm of work and silence. Olives and sea air, laughter at the market stalls, and evenings under the stars with Elena and Nikos. Yet beneath the fragile peace, I could feel him circling like a storm offshore. Gabriel was not a man who accepted being left behind. He thrived on control, and when control slipped through his fingers, he became dangerous. At first, it was emails, long, rambling messages where anger and desperation tangled together like thorns. "You've ruined my reputation. Everyone's asking questions. Just come home and we can forget this ever happened. The next day, you'll regret embarrassing me. You'll see what happens when you try to stand on your own." I ignored them. Then came the letters arriving at the farmhouse like poisoned gifts. One was shoved into the gate, written in his slanted handwriting. Another arrived by courier, delivered with a false smile. Elena would shake her head, muttering in Greek, as she tossed them into a drawer we never opened. But each one chipped at me, a reminder that he wasn't finished. The escalation came one hot afternoon in July. I had just returned from the market, arms aching from carrying baskets of olives, when I saw him. Gabriel standing in the courtyard like he belonged there, his sunglasses reflecting the farmhouse walls. My stomach twisted, but my body moved before fear could root me in place. "What are you doing here?" My voice came out steadier than I felt. He smiled faintly, that same smile that once charmed investors, friends, even me. "I came to bring you back. This phase has gone on long enough." Elena stepped between us, her small frame radiating a force that startled even me. She pointed toward the road and said in clipped English, "You leave, now." Gabriel's smile slipped. He looked at her like she was an inconvenience, then back at me. "You're hiding behind strangers now, pathetic Anna. You think these people care about you? They'll toss you aside the second you're not useful." I clenched my fists, the words searing but powerless. He didn't know Elena's tears when she showed me photos of her daughter. He didn't know Nikos's quiet patience teaching me how to prune olive branches. They weren't placeholders. They were family in a way Gabriel never understood. "You need to leave," I said, my voice trembling but firm. "You don't get to come here and demand anything. Not anymore." His jaw tightened. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "I have your name on every account. I can destroy your credit, your reputation. One word and you'll have nothing." For a flicker of a moment, fear stabbed through me. But then I remembered pawning my wedding ring standing at that bus station with nothing but €80 and still finding a way forward. I had already had nothing, and I had survived. You already left me with nothing, I whispered, and I found everything you couldn't give me. His eyes flashed, and for the first time I saw it panic. He wasn't here because he wanted me. He was here because he had lost control. Nikos emerged from the shed, a pruning hook still in his hand, his presence solid as stone. He didn't say a word, but he didn't have to. Gabriel glanced at him, then back at me, and for once he was the one who backed away. "This isn't over," he spat before storming down the road, his footsteps crunching against the gravel. The silence he left behind was heavy, but not suffocating. Elena touched my arm, her voice soft. "He cannot take what you have built here." That night I sat by the firelight, sketchbook open in my lap. For weeks I had been doodling absent-mindedly, olive branches, market stalls, faces blurred by memory. But now lines began to form into something clearer. Patterns, textures, designs. My old dream of textile work resurfaced, breathing through my fingertips. Gabriel's shadow had smothered it for years, but here in the quiet of Greece it grew again. I sent a photo of one design to a woman I had met at the market who sold woven goods in Athens. Within days she replied with interest, offering to showcase my work. For the first time in years, I felt the spark of a future that belonged only to me. Still, Gabriel's threats lingered. I checked my accounts obsessively, fearing he might drain what little I had left. I spoke with lawyers in Athens, their advice calm but firm: document everything, save every message, prepare for the possibility of divorce proceedings that would turn ugly. It terrified me but also steadied me, because fear meant I was no longer in denial. Fear meant I was facing it. Weeks later, another letter arrived. This one not from Gabriel but from his attorney. A formal notice: he is filing for divorce. He intends to claim financial misconduct, abandonment, and instability. I laughed bitterly when I read the words. Instability. The man who left his wife stranded in a foreign town dared to call me unstable. But beneath the anger there was relief. He was forcing the ending, and I was ready for it. The months that followed were grueling. Court documents, affidavits, endless calls across time zones. Gabriel painted me as a reckless woman who had run off squandering money, humiliating him in public. But each time his lies stacked higher, I laid down the truth. Photos of my time at the farmhouse, proof of his abandonment, testimonies from Elena and Nikos, even receipts from that pawn shop in Italy where I had traded my wedding ring just to survive. Piece by piece his mask cracked. Judges and lawyers could see it, the arrogance, the carelessness, the cruelty. And though the process drained me, each hearing became less about fear and more about reclaiming my voice. The final hearing was held over video conference. I sat at Elena's kitchen table, her hand gripping mine, while Gabriel sat in a sterile office in Boston, his lawyer at his side. For hours, arguments flew back and forth, accusations sharp as knives. But then the judge's words cut through. The evidence demonstrates abandonment, emotional cruelty, and financial misconduct. The court sides with the petitioner, me. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. I had won not just the case, but myself. The divorce was final. My accounts were safe. My name was mine again. When the call ended, Elena wept and kissed my cheeks, and Nikos poured wine until our laughter filled the house. For the first time in years, I felt light. Yet that night, lying awake under the farmhouse roof, I realized it wasn't victory that mattered most. It was survival. It was the quiet act of standing when someone tried to erase you. It was discovering that freedom sometimes begins with the cruelest betrayal. And though scars remained, they no longer shamed me. They marked me as someone who had been broken and rebuilt stronger. The months after the court ruling unfolded like a season I had never known existed. One where the air itself felt lighter, where the weight of survival no longer bent my shoulders, and where I woke each morning, not to fear, but to possibility. I would walk the olive groves in the cool dawn, the silver-green leaves whispering in the breeze, and for the first time in years, my thoughts were mine alone. Gabriel was still a ghost that haunted the edges of my mind, but he was a powerless one. His letters stopped. His emails slowed to a trickle, then ceased altogether. In their place, silence bloomed, a silence that felt less like absence and more like release. I threw myself into design work, sketching patterns inspired by the Greek landscape waves, curling like the Aegean olive branches woven into lattices, suns rising in concentric circles of gold and crimson. Elena would peer over my shoulder, her eyes shining, whispering, "Beautiful Anna, so beautiful." Nikos, ever practical, helped me carry bolts of fabric into town, where I began to sell scarves and shawls stitched with my designs. At the market, strangers began to know my name. Not Gabriel's wife, not the woman abandoned in Italy, but Anna, the designer, the woman who created pieces that told stories in color and thread. Each sale felt like a small reclamation proof that I could build something with my own hands. Yet healing is never linear. Some nights I still woke in a sweat, the echo of Gabriel's laughter clawing through my chest, the memory of taillights disappearing into an Italian street. Some afternoons I caught myself glancing at the road, half expecting his figure to appear again, demanding, accusing, belittling. But each time the fear rose, Elena's gentle presence, or Nikos's steady silence, anchored me back to the truth: he no longer had power here. One evening, as we sat around the wooden kitchen table sharing roasted lamb and fresh bread, Elena reached for my hand. "Anna," she said softly, "you are not only surviving, you are living. Do you see that?" Her words hit me harder than I expected. Tears welled unbidden because for so long survival had been my only measure. I had forgotten what it felt like to live. In late autumn, I received an invitation from the woman in Athens who had first agreed to showcase my work. She wanted me to present a full collection at a gallery opening: textile sketches, photographs of the process. My heart raced as I read the letter, both thrilled and terrified. The voice of doubt whispered, "You're not ready. You're still the woman who was left behind." But louder than that came another voice, one I had learned to trust. "You are more than what he left you with." The weeks leading up to the opening were a whirlwind. I worked late into the night, my hands raw, my eyes burning, but my spirit alive. Elena would scold me gently, pressing warm tea into my palms, while Nikos would shake his head and mutter, "Work, work, always work," though his eyes glimmered with pride. The night of the opening arrived, the city humming with energy. I wore a simple black dress, the same one I had bought months earlier as armor against Gabriel, but this time it wasn't armor, it was a declaration. As I walked into the gallery, the walls draped with my work, I felt something unfurl in my chest. Guests moved through the space, pausing to admire, to ask questions, to listen, as I explained the meaning behind each design. When one woman draped a shawl across her shoulders and whispered, "This feels like hope," my throat tightened. Because that was exactly what it was: hope stitched into fabric, the tangible proof of survival, transformed into beauty. And yet, just as I began to believe the night would be untouched by shadows, I saw him. Gabriel. He stood at the far end of the gallery, his suit immaculate, his smile polished for an audience that didn't know the truth. My heart lurched, my breath caught. He shouldn't have been there. The divorce was final. The distance was established. And yet there he was, inserting himself into the life I had built beyond him. Our eyes met, and for a split second the old fear clawed at me. But then I remembered the court's words, the olive groves, Elena's voice calling me family. I straightened my spine. He approached, weaving through the crowd with the ease of someone who believed he belonged everywhere. "Anna," he said smoothly, his voice pitched just for me. "You've done well for yourself. I almost didn't recognize you." I met his gaze without flinching. "That's because you never really saw me." For a moment, something flickered across his face. Surprise, maybe even regret. But it vanished beneath arrogance. "You should thank me," he said softly. "Without me, you'd still be nothing. I made you strong." The cruelty of his words landed like an old bruise pressed too hard. But instead of pain, I felt clarity. "No, Gabriel," I said, my voice steady. "You didn't make me strong. You tried to break me. I made myself strong." People nearby glanced toward us, curiosity flickering in their eyes. Gabriel noticed too, his smile tightening, his control slipping. He leaned closer, his whisper sharp, "Enjoy this while it lasts. Without me, it will all crumble." I smiled faintly, not with bitterness but with certainty. "Watch me prove you wrong." And with that I turned away. The rest of the evening unfolded like a dream. Sales were made, contacts exchanged, compliments offered. And though I could feel Gabriel's presence at the edge of the room circling like a vulture, he was powerless. I had already walked away once. I could do it again. When the night ended, I stepped outside into the cool Athens air. The city lights shimmered like constellations brought down to earth. Elena hugged me tightly, whispering, "Proud. So proud." Nikos clapped my shoulder, his eyes shining. And in that moment, I knew no matter what Gabriel tried, no matter how many shadows he cast, he could not take this from me. Because I had built it myself. Because I was no longer afraid. The morning after the gallery opening, I woke with sunlight spilling through the curtains of my small Athens apartment, my head still buzzing with the voices of strangers who had praised my work, who had seen me not as someone's wife or someone's shadow, but as an artist, as Anna. For the first time in years, my reflection in the mirror looked like a woman who belonged to herself. But Gabriel was not finished. By noon, an email arrived in my inbox, short, sharp, designed to cut. "You embarrassed me last night. Don't think this little game will last. I can still ruin you." I stared at the screen, the words blurring for a moment, before I closed my laptop with a calmness that startled me. Months ago, those threats would have sent me spiraling into fear, desperate to defend myself, terrified of the power he still held. Now they only rang hollow. His empire of control was crumbling, and he was lashing out with the only weapons he had left: empty words. Still, when I walked the streets of Athens later that afternoon, I couldn't shake the feeling of eyes on me. I told myself it was paranoia, the shadow of old fears. But when I stopped at a cafe and saw his reflection in the glass across the street standing half hidden beneath the awning of a shop, I knew it wasn't just in my head. He followed me. For days I caught glimpses. His figure at the market, his silhouette near the gallery, his car parked outside the farmhouse when I returned to Elena and Nikos. He never approached, never spoke, but his presence pressed on me like a hand at my throat. One evening, as I prepared dinner with Elena, I confessed what I had seen. Her eyes darkened, her hands gripping the knife tightly. "Men like him do not stop until they are forced to," she said. Nikos nodded solemnly, adding in his quiet voice, "Then you must show him you are not afraid." The chance came sooner than I expected. It was late, the moon high, when I stepped outside to gather laundry from the line. The night air was heavy with the scent of jasmine. That's when I heard its footsteps crunching softly on the gravel. My heart raced, but I didn't retreat. I turned, and there he was. Gabriel stepping out of the shadows, his face half lit by moonlight. "You've made this very difficult," he said, his voice low but trembling. I crossed my arms over my chest, my fear folding into something sharper. "You should leave." He shook his head, stepping closer. "No, you should leave. With me. Enough of this fantasy. Enough of pretending you can live without me." For a long moment, I simply looked at him. At the man who once held my dreams in his hand, who laughed as he discarded me like luggage in a foreign street, who now stood before me desperate and hollow. And then something in me snapped. I stepped forward, my voice rising strong and unshaken. "You left me in Italy with nothing but 80 euros and a phone you blocked. You thought I would crawl back. You thought I would break. But look at me, Gabriel. Look at what I've built. You didn't destroy me, you freed me. And that is the only gift you ever gave me." His face twisted, anger and disbelief colliding. "You're nothing without me," he spat again, but the words rang false even to his own ears. Behind me, the farmhouse door creaked open. Elena and Nico stepped out, their presence solid, unyielding. Gabriel's eyes flicked to them, and I saw at the realization that he was outnumbered, outmatched, and no longer feared. He backed away slowly, his voice cracking as he muttered, "This isn't over." But even he knew it was. I watched him disappear into the darkness, the crunch of gravel fading until only silence remained. And in that silence, I felt something break free inside me, a chain I hadn't realized was still clinging. That was the last time I saw him. In the months that followed, my work flourished. The gallery led to more opportunities, collaborations, commissions. My name spread beyond the markets of Athens, whispered in circles of art and design. Each new creation felt like a stitch in the fabric of a new life, one that belonged entirely to me. And yet the most valuable thing I gained wasn't success or recognition. It was the quiet mornings with Elena sipping coffee as the sun rose over the olive groves. It was Nikos teaching me how to graft trees, his hands patient and steady. It was the knowledge that family could be chosen, that love could be steady and kind, that life could be rebuilt from the ruins of betrayal. Sometimes when I look back on that day in Italy, the memory still burns, the laughter, the car driving away, the humiliation of being discarded. But I no longer see it as the end of my story. I see it as the beginning. The day he left me behind was the day I found myself. And maybe that's the truth about betrayal. It feels like death when it happens, a ripping apart of everything you thought you knew. But sometimes it's not the end. Sometimes it's the doorway to a life you never would have dared to imagine. So if you're listening to me now, if you've ever been abandoned, betrayed, or made to feel like nothing, I want you to hear this. You are not nothing. You are not disposable. You are not defined by the people who tried to break you. You are stronger than they will ever understand. And sometimes the sweetest revenge isn't anger or destruction. Sometimes the sweetest revenge is simply surviving, thriving, and living a life so full that those who tried to erase you become nothing more than shadows in the background. If my story touched you, if you've ever stood where I stood and felt like the world had ended, I hope you'll stay with me. Like this video if it gave you strength. Share it with someone who needs to be reminded of their own power. Subscribe if you want more stories that shine light into the darkest corners of betrayal and survival. And most importantly, leave me a comment. Tell me the moment you realized you were stronger than what tried to destroy you. Because sometimes telling your story is the final step in taking your power back.